Okay.
That was inspiring music.
I think they're just waiting for your magic shots. Now, Robert, we just met before this, and we'll catch up more given your remarkable record you have as an investor. Now, you're lucky or just plain lucky? Do you have a method to your success?
Well, I do, but I will say part of it is informed by history and background like anything else. You know, I started my career in semiconductor testing at Bell Laboratories. There's probably only a few of you who remember Bell Laboratories, but it in essence was the cradle of innovation in America for so long and actually built a lot of the fundamental technologies that we are enjoying today. I went from there, of course, as a chemical engineer, worked in process industries at the dawning of the implementation of compute in these process industries, which created massive amounts of productivity.
But that's so many years back.
So many years back, but it informs everything I do today, because what we focused on there was how do you optimize processes. In some cases, it was optimizing the way you ran a distillation column or a plant, and then we took computing power and put it in the offices, and we optimized the way we did work, from processing invoices to managing banking transactions. And from there, went to Goldman Sachs and advised Apple Computer and Microsoft and Texas Instruments, Hewlett Packard, eBay, Yahoo, and realized that enterprise software companies, which is what we invest in, which are business-to-business companies, actually didn't have unified methods in the way that they either approached their customers, built their products, their processes, and what I brought was an engineered approach to investing. So we bring a very systemic approach to creating value in our companies across the elements that create value in enterprise software companies. So that's how they relate.
When you think of enterprise software, it's not easy because you got to look at the scale, the business processes, the technology behind it. It takes a lot of effort to make that choice. Is there any easy lines or easy way to understand your strategy?
I think, yes. One of the most important things is we focus on critical factors for success that are under our control. One of the things that's under your control is hiring people. And so from to give you a perspective, we have aptitude tests, personality profiles that find what kind of job you'd be best suited for. So for last year, 2023, we had 2.3 million people apply for jobs at our companies. We own 86 enterprise software companies, 500 million users of our software companies operate in 180 countries. 2.3 million people applied for jobs. We tested 489,000 people to get a hiring pool of 60,000 to hire 15,000.
Amazing.
That is a process by which it gives us what we think are people who are highly qualified to work in enterprise software companies. That is just one example of what we do.
But that's quite basic, right? People is everything, right? And you got to have process at a scale to hire right people. And it's not like few people, hundreds of people.
Yeah, you've put the right emphasis, right people. So there may be somebody who's very smart, but they may not be suited for working in development or for services or for sales. Personalities are different, skill sets are different, and what we've done is developed a system where we can optimize. You may come in and say, I want to work in your support department, but based on the test and the personality, say, you might be better off in development. So why don't you try the career or the role there? So that's how we do it.
Robert, I'm starting a new firm called GFTN. I'm happy you're not there to check with me before I join the company. I've just become a CEO.
Right.
I don't have to worry about your process.
Yeah, we might have to test you to see if you're going to be good at that job.
But we'll get the new people using your processes.
Right.
Now let's switch to the reason why we are here,
Sure.
Gen AI.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure with your remarkable track record, you'll be looking at Gen AI as the next big enterprise tech stack.
Right.
Any big insights from you?
The most important thing that I tell people about Gen AI in the world I live in, which is enterprise software, is that you need to maintain and have sovereignty and dominion over the data and the workflows. Now, this is an important concept, so if you think about what's actually occurring in this world, you have these foundational models which are learning from data that's available generally. You have these hyperscalers, and
Yes.
one was just here a few moments ago.
Yeah, I asked him some few questions. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they capture a tremendous amount of data and information,
Yeah.
consumer data and information. Well, in the enterprise, banking data, financial data that might be in insurance companies, that data exists in the customer systems of records that exist in the enterprise software companies.
Indeed.
If you have sovereignty and dominion over them, you're the only ones who can train those models to now deliver a unique set of products, tools, solutions to your customer set. Otherwise, these Gen AI models will basically generate answers that may not be relevant or exist in the context of those industries. Now, as an investor, which is the important part of this, these things come in waves. The first is not too dissimilar to when we went from on-premise software to cloud software or mobile. It comes in waves. The first wave, the beneficiaries are hardware providers, silicon, hardware, infrastructure. The next wave actually typically are the services providers who are providing compute as a service. The difference that's occurring right now is a lot of that investment's actually being done by the hyperscalers.
Indeed.
Right. So a lot of the individual investors don't have access to that. And then finally, the wave that captures what I call usually the vast majority of the economic benefit are the software providers. 97% of software companies are private. And so as a result of that, the only way you gain access to those companies that will ultimately capture the vast majority of the benefit is going through the private market. So there's a unique investment dynamic. If you looked at waves before, you could invest in many cases in public companies as an investor to participate in those waves, but not so much. It's very narrow as to what you can invest in.
That brings to your own PE firm, the Vista.
Right.
So how do you cut through this massive, I would say, bubble of AI opportunity and assets out there looking for capital? How do you sieve through it?
Right. I think, again, it's systemic for us. We now today own, call it 85 software companies. We've announced another 5 that we are buying. If you aggregate all of our revenues, we're about the 4th or 5th largest enterprise software company in the world. So, Microsoft, SAP, Oracle, and Adobe, Salesforce.
And you have investment in all these things.
Exactly. And we are control investors. And what we do then is drive systemic implementation of Gen AI across layers within the portfolio companies. One layer is code development. 100% of our companies have some form of Gen AI code assist code development, where we're seeing productivity from an individual basis between 10 and 40% by developer, and across the portfolio about 10%. Well, now you can drive that productivity in writing more code, developing more products, or reducing the cost of the development. We also have a layer for productivity across all of the portfolio companies, which then ultimately can make them more productive in the way they do customer service, the way they do go-to-market approaches, those sorts of things. And then lastly, we have processes to develop new products. So we have things called hackathons, and I think we've had 4 in the last 18 months. And from that products, where we will bring in our partners, which are Anthropic, OpenAI, others. We're adding a few other partners to work with our portfolio companies to develop unique applications that they can then sell into their customer base and enable their customers to capture the benefits of Gen AI without actually having to invest and learn those models themselves.
Good. I will take on this because Singapore FinTech Festival does a lot of hackathon. Next year, we'll get you to
Love
to sponsor one of the big hackathons here.
Love to. I think it's one of the most exciting things, and one of the things we do, which I think the government will like, is we invite students. So in our hackathons, we have a student, usually from a historically black college, on each one of the teams.
Fabulous.
Because it's important for that next generation to understand how Gen AI is utilized in the enterprise, in business. Most of them get experience, of course, in the consumer world, because they're doing things which are fun and exciting, and I can say something and speak in 40 languages, or create a video of you and I together, surfboarding, even though we're just sitting right here.
Yes.
But how does it actually used in managing a transaction in business, and what is the utility?
The real economy use cases.
The real economy use cases, and ultimately it's going to be those activities that create the most economic value for the companies that utilize it.
Fantastic. Now, before I get to you just gave a sense of where I'd go next question. Portfolio companies, give some name you have invested in this space. I know it's a bit of a...
Oh, there's plenty. We've got 85 of them. We just announced...
Give a couple of big names.
Smartsheet was just invested. Cloud Software Group was one of the largest.
How come you're so lucky?
Well, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you're smart, and sometimes you hang around the right people. So we try to pull it all together.
Thank you. I take it as privilege to be with you.
Yeah, it's my honor.
So up there, some of the companies out there of your portfolio company.
Right.
Now let's switch on something very.
Well, let's talk about this because this is an important thing.
Please
I
go
just
ahead.
named a few here. MindBody, for instance, supports gyms, gym membership, a pretty significant share in the marketplace. But here's a typical example where we took a Gen AI solution coming out of the hackathon that when implemented for customer support, so you're calling, you got a customer support call, we now are deflecting, when I call that, 37% of the customer support calls and resolving them with a 98% accuracy. Which means you call, you have a problem, it's resolved by one of our Gen AI engines. The implications of that are we now can reduce our cost of support by 32%. Now think about this, a service-based economy where there are about 1 billion people with $40 trillion in salaries paid in that industry are getting affected by Gen AI in this contract. These are green shoots, these are early shoots, but these are the sort of implications that governments have to think about in terms of what's going to happen. People have built their entire infrastructure of their countries in many cases on attracting, developing, information services, technology type people, which are now going to be affected by Gen AI and support and services, et cetera. So that's something that has a massive implication that has to be thought through and addressed.
So do you think there'll be a job implication because of this switch?
There's no question about it, and it's going to be global. And so the countries that are more forward-leaning, thinking about how do you retrain, retool, repurpose, re-enable, people that will be affected by this in call centers, et cetera, if you retrain them, they can be very productive once they're retrained and utilizing Gen AI tools and systems as opposed to being eliminated from the workforce.
You talk of IT programmers. There's one statistic out there. There are 30 million programmers, 10 million Chinese, 12 million Indians, rest of the world.
Yeah.
So if at all it's going to affect is only two parts of the world, China or India. So how do you see this whole re-architecting will happen on the skill set dealing with this new technology?
It will be the more forward-thinking governments and companies that will actually affect this most dramatically.
Yeah.
If you stand back and ignore it, I think there are going to be some negative implications. If you embrace it, you'll have the ability to outdistance and outpace competitors in some cases. In some cases, it'll be other economies because your economic base of people will be more in tune with utilizing this tool to create production.
Right.
So to give you an example, from our perspective, we measure the productivity of every one of our software companies for their customers. So the average software company that we own today is a 625% return on investment for our average customer. So almost any industry, your next best purchase utilization is buying more software. When you implement the Gen AI enabled software, it is in some cases twice that. Okay, so, and this is the early innings. We've been at this 2.5 years. These are the early stages, and we're starting to see a real inflection point of the productivity. So that's the elements that are important to think about.
Thank you. Now, we don't have much time, but let us switch to something very close to Singapore FinTech Festival. The GFTN, which I'm going to be the incoming CEO of that entity, is inclusion. We really care about it because large part of our thinking is to Global South.
Right.
How do you bring technology, prosperity to Global South?
Right.
You have done a fabulous work in this space.
Oh, well,
if you go somebody to your Wikipedia, you have some millions of dollars you have given out to students, black students.
You want to say hundreds of millions, but anyway, keep going.
Okay. So where do you see philanthropy going? Because there are some criticism, philanthropy is not that optimally deployed, giving money is not good enough. There has to be something with that.
I think the important thing is to create philanthropy should be an enablement mechanism. I like to think about it should enable people to become their best selves, and I call it really unleash the human spirit. That's how I really think about it. So what does that mean? It means opening the aperture of opportunity. It's for our Intern XL program, which we're going to create an instance here so that Singapore will be the hub to make a more inclusive set of opportunities.
I do a big clap.
Well, yeah, my pleasure. Inclusive set of opportunities for the people in Southeast Asia. How do you ensure that, no matter your family background, income, where you were born, you have an on-ramp into opportunities, training, enablement, internships, jobs, exposure. My life changed because I started an internship at Bell Laboratories. Okay, so that's part of that. It's also enabling and putting tools and infrastructure in place so that, in the U.S., certain of the communities that I come from, actually, when I grew up, doesn't have a branch bank. And so they're banked by what are called CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions. So we've been working in digitizing them so they become more efficient.
More efficient, yeah.
And then they're lending capital. I mean, $10,000, which make a huge difference in those
So you're
businesses.
fixing the infrastructure to make inclusion much more efficient.
Absolutely. And then you drive capital into that enabled infrastructure. So think about it as an enablement platform as the most effective philanthropic activity is you enable people to become their best selves, and I call it liberate the human spirit.
I don't want to put in spot, I just can't help it.
Put me on the spot.
Okay, I'm into this massive plans next year to focus on developing infrastructure, on payment infrastructure,
Right.
national ID infrastructure, data infrastructure for especially Africa.
Right.
Can I call you?
I have plenty of software that can help.
Your thought process of putting money behind infrastructure, enabling people to get over the social challenges is perhaps the most smartest way to think about inclusion.
Oh, thanks.
Any examples you want to share in your life where you have done?
Yeah, I mean, so there's
There's a
certain
bunch of
things. There's a
examples.
bunch that are up there now. If you take Student Freedom Initiative, for instance, one of the things we've been focused on was the amount of crushing student debt for students, which I learned when I made the Morehouse gift. And so now what we've built is a system whereby students, when they borrow capital, we charge the system, and they pay it back, it actually doesn't get paid back to the government, it actually gets relent to the next group of students. That is an elegant way, and at this point we're at, every really $10 million gives in perpetuity 100 students financial capacity in perpetuity. So every year, forever, right? So those are the sorts of what I call smart solutions. Another one in that case was the digitization of the historically black colleges and universities so they have broadband access. You will not participate in the new economy if you don't have broadband access.
Exactly.
Point one. If you don't have broadband access, you sure won't be able to participate in the Gen AI revolution. So all of those are infrastructure. In many cases, we're doing private, public, in this case, U.S. government partnerships to ensure we can enable these communities to participate more fully in the economic opportunity that exists in our world.
And do you track what happens after that?
Of course.
The performance?
Absolutely.
Any good example where you can see that person has changed life?
Oh, there's plenty. There's one of my Morehouse students sent me a note. He just graduated from law school last night. And I had something. Yesterday, and passed the bar, and he said, it's changed my life. And what I can now do is go back and serve my community to ensure that it has access to the legal capacity that ensures that they aren't, abused in certain constructs. So
Sure.
We have plenty of those examples. And to me, that's an important part of the work that I do.
As an entrepreneur, any wisdom to people that this is how they should think about their life, entrepreneurship?
I will tell you, Spencer, the most important thing I would say is you have to, I tell my kids there are three rules. I said I'm only going to leave them three things, okay? And the first one is that they are enough. So I always say that, and that's an important part to know and have the confidence that you are enough to change the condition of yourself or the community that you're from. You are enough to do that. So it doesn't necessarily require a whole lot. You are enough to make that happen. The second thing I always tell them is, I hope they discover the joy of figuring things out. The world is filled with complex problems. You need very thoughtful, deliberate, informed thinking to solve those complex problems. That's why I say you are enough. And discover the joy of figuring things out. And lastly, most importantly, is love is all that matters. So those are the three tools.
Absolutely. Now, I know we have a little less than a second.
1 second.
1 second.
Yeah.
As a minority,
Yeah.
do you any time in your life felt that I just can't do it? I'm just against a...
I will say you feel the weight of it, especially in America, every single day, but you have to fight every single day. That's the nature of where we are in this construct, in this state. I have the great benefit of growing up in what I call, grew up in what I call a beloved community. My community supported the children. that I came up with. And they thought about it and gave us the confidence, the skills as best they could. I grew up in a segregated neighborhood, all black neighborhood. We just started, busing to actually go to better resource schools. It only lasted a few years. But I saw the importance of community and foundation to give you a sense of self, to know that you are enough, to equip you so you can solve these tools, and to now pay it forward with love. So all of those are things are important parts of my upbringing that I think enabled me to continue to move forward.
Just love each other.
Yeah, every day.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Come.
you.